Barbara Nielsen was already on her knees in the back passage when morning found her. The stone flags had not yet surrendered the night's cold. Damp climbed through her skirt and into her bones, while Mrs. Croft, Lady Nielsen's housekeeper, held her by the shoulder with the heavy, practical grip of a woman who had long ago stopped distinguishing cruelty from duty. A silver tray lay on the floor nearby, ringing still from where it had struck the wall before spinning to a stop. It had not cracked, but one edge showed a faint dent. The dent would be discussed for days as if it were a broken limb. "Plain and useless," Lady Nielsen said from the threshold, as if delivering a fact in a courtroom. "At 21, and you cannot even polish what you touch." Barbara kept her eyes on the tray. The tray was easier to look at than her stepmother's face, powdered and fine-boned and pinched with the kind of temper that preferred witnesses. Lady Nielsen had dressed early in violet silk with jet beading, because she expected callers by noon. She always insulted Barbara most thoroughly before receiving company, as though clearing an unpleasant stain from the household. "I told you before dawn," Lady Nielsen went on, "that if this service looked anything less than proper, you would answer for it. Perhaps now you will remember." Barbara did remember. She remembered each command in this house, where she was forbidden the drawing-room unless summoned, forbidden to write letters uninspected, forbidden to ride though she had ridden as a child, forbidden to call any room in the townhouse hers, though her father had bought it 22 years before with hard coin and careful books. She remembered, too, that silence often prevented worse things. Mrs. Croft released her shoulder only when Lady Nielsen gave a little flick of her fingers. Barbara rose, smoothing her apron with controlled hands. Her palms were raw from polish. The room smelled of metal and vinegar and coal smoke. "Well," Lady Nielsen asked, "do you mean to stare all day?" "No, my lady," Barbara said. No plea, no excuse. That was her only disobedience these days. She refused to beg prettily. Lady Nielsen's mouth tightened. "Take it back. Start again. You will not eat until it is fit to be seen." Barbara bowed her head and lifted the tray. It was heavier than it looked, and she held it firmly this time, both hands steady. When she turned, she caught sight of herself in its warped reflection. Narrow face, dark hair pulled too tightly, skin made paler by the grey half-light, eyes larger than fashion deemed gentle, not pretty enough to be indulged, not decorative enough to be forgiven. People glanced once, dismissed her, and did not notice that her stillness had edges. By the kitchen hearth, while coals snapped and the servants moved around her in purposeful loops, she worked the cloth in patient circles and let her mind travel where no one could follow. Candlelight on ledgers, her father's ink-stained fingers guiding hers over columns of figures. "Accounts are stories that can be proved," he had told her when she was 12, and fiercely proud to balance a page. "If someone lies, the numbers tell on them, if you learn to listen." On winter nights he had taught her bits of Latin, laughing at her stern concentration. Vir prudens rationem sequitur. A wise person follows reason. He had been dead 4 years. Since then, Lady Nielsen had become a widow in black for exactly 1 season, then a hostess in silk for ever after. Debts had multiplied quietly. Jewellery disappeared and reappeared and disappeared again. Creditors came by side doors. Once Barbara had heard her own name spoken in the breakfast room by a man with yellow gloves and a scar at his jaw. "She's not handsome," he said, "but she's young and legal enough. I could be persuaded." Lady Nielsen had laughed low in her throat. "Persuasion is expensive, Mr. Pike." Barbara had stood in the corridor with a tray of tea and learned what it was to go cold all through. By noon, the silver tray gleamed to Mrs. Croft's satisfaction, and Barbara was sent out with a pawn ticket for a brooch and 2 shillings wrapped in paper. "Do not speak to anyone," Lady Nielsen said as Barbara took her shawl. "Do not wander. And if you are recognised by someone respectable, remember to keep your eyes lowered. You look insolent when you look directly at people." Barbara stepped into the street without answering. London pressed around her at once. Mud and wheels and hawkers and chimney soot. A city that had no time for one quiet woman carrying someone else's debts in her pocket. She walked fast toward Covent Garden, past barrows stacked with winter apples and ragged boys weaving between carts. The market's clamour rose ahead like surf. She was halfway across the square when shouting split from the knot of voices near the corner of James Street. A boy in stable livery staggered backward into open space, one hand at his temple. Blood ran bright between his fingers. He swayed once and folded to the stones. Two men in rough coats forced a bay horse through the crush behind him. The horse was magnificent despite the mud. Deep-chested black mane slick with sweat, eyes rolling white. Its left rein dragged. One man jerked at the bit while the other shoved bystanders aside with his shoulder. Curses flared. Someone shouted for a constable. No constable appeared. Barbara had a clear path to keep walking. The pawnshop lay 2 streets away. Lady Nielsen would ask questions if she was late. Any interference in street violence could end with broken teeth or worse, and she had no protector to call afterward. She knew all this in the single heartbeat it took the horse to rear half a hand and strike sparks from the cobbles. Then she saw the saddlecloth beneath the mud, dark blue, edged in tarnished silver braid, with crestwork she recognised from old society papers that lined the nursery trunk, the Falcon and Tower of Mariston. She dropped to the injured boy before the thought had fully formed. "Can you hear me?" she asked, tearing his loosened headscarf free. He tried to sit up, dazed. "They took him—" "I know." She pressed the cloth hard against the bleeding cut and tied it with brisk fingers around her own wrist to hold until he could take over. "Keep pressure there. Do not sleep." Then she stood and stepped directly into the horse's path. The nearer thief barked a laugh. "Move, girl!" Barbara ignored him and reached for the bridle with her scarf-bound hand. The bay tossed its head violently, iron flashing inches from her cheek. She heard her father's voice as clearly as if he stood at her shoulder. Never pull against fear. Give it something steadier to follow. "Easy," she murmured, low and even beneath the market noise. "Easy now. Good lad. You're all right." Her fingers found the warm line where jaw met throat. The horse shuddered, blew out hard, then stilled enough for her to slide closer to the shoulder and turn him with gentle pressure. The thief swore and grabbed for the rein. A fishmonger swung a crate into his knees. The second man vanished into the crowd when a cluster of porters surged forward, shouting that watchmen were coming whether or not they were. Barbara did not look back. She led the stallion clear of the thickest crush and onto broader pavement, one hand on the bridle, one on the neck, speaking to him in that same quiet cadence as if they were alone in a stable at dawn. He danced once, then settled into a tense but obedient walk. By the time Mariston House rose ahead, high gates, clipped yews, stone fronts severe as a judge, her boots were soaked and her pulse had turned to an ache at her throat. A groom ran from the stable yard at the sight of the horse and shouted for help. 2 more men followed. Questions came from 3 directions at once. "Where did you get him?" "Who are you?" "Were there riders with him?" Barbara released the bridle only when another pair of hands took it with competence and care. "Covent Garden," she said. 2 men attempted to force him through the market. A stable boy was struck down. Send someone for a physician." The groom gaped at her scarf, now dark with someone else's blood. "Good God! Bootsteps sounded from the yard entrance, crisp and unhurried, and the men around her straightened in a way that named rank before she turned. Adrian Vale, Duke of Mariston, crossed the cobbles with the contained force of a man who wasted nothing, not movement, not expression, not trust. He was perhaps 30, tall, impeccably dressed in dark wool despite the mud, his face cut in disciplined lines that gave little away except displeasure. His gaze went first to the horse. "Is he lame?" "No, Your Grace," the head groom said, "shaken but sound." "Who touched him?" The question came like a blade laid on a table, clean, dangerous, waiting. Barbara met his eyes because she had forgotten, for one exhausted second, Lady Nielsen's rule about lowering hers. "I did." He looked at her properly then, taking in the plain dress, the wet hem, the bloodied scarf wrapped about her wrist. "Your name?" "Barbara Nielsen." At the name, something unreadable crossed his face and vanished. "Nielsen," he repeated, as if testing an old word. The stallion threw his head again, snorting toward the stable doors. Instinctively, Barbara lifted her hand to soothe him. The scarf slipped loose, and the inner wrist flashed pale, a small wing-shaped birthmark, dark against the skin like a swallow in flight. The Duke went still. It was not the stillness of anger. It was the stillness of memory striking hard. For a moment all noise in the yard seemed to recede, men shifting, tack creaking, hooves stamping. Adrian Vale's eyes remained fixed on that mark, then rose to her face with a focus that made Barbara abruptly aware of the mud on her sleeves and the pounding in her temples. "Miss Nielsen," he said, quieter now but no less commanding, "you will come inside. My steward will take your statement." "I would prefer to return home," she answered, because every minute delayed meant questions, accusations, punishment. "You may prefer many things," he said. "At present I require facts. There has been an organised attempt to strip my stables for 3 weeks. Today my horse was taken in daylight. I will know by whom and how." She drew a measured breath. "Then send for the physician first." His brow shifted faintly. "For whom?" "The stable boy in Covent Garden, head wound. He may not wake if it is not treated." A pause, brief, assessing, and then he turned to a footman. "Go, now, bring Dr. Hales and 2 men." The footman ran. Only then did Barbara feel the first edge of trembling begin in her hands. Inside Mariston House the warmth hit like a blow. She was shown not to a drawing-room, but to a smaller office lined with ledgers and estate maps. The steward, Mr. Ellery, asked precise questions in a polite voice sharpened by suspicion. Descriptions of the thieves, direction of flight, exact words heard, whether she knew anyone employed in Mariston stables, whether she had ever visited the paddocks near Hampstead, where Tack had gone missing last fortnight. Barbara answered plainly, without embroidery. When she did not know, she said so. At the end, Mr. Ellery folded his notes and watched her over steepled fingers. "You understand, Miss Nielsen, that thieves often use intermediaries who appear respectable." Barbara almost laughed at the irony. Respectability had never protected her from anything. "I understand." The door opened before he could continue. Lady Nielsen swept in a storm of scent and black lace, cheeks flushed with outrage. "There you are," she snapped at Barbara. "Do you enjoy humiliating me, dragging our name through stables and street brawls?" Mr. Ellery rose. "Lady Nielsen, His Grace requested—" "I care very little what His Grace requested. My stepdaughter is unstable when overtired. She imagines dramas. She will come home at once." Barbara stood, spine straight despite exhaustion. "I'm not unstable." Lady Nielsen ignored her and fixed on the steward with practised tear-bright indignation. She has always been difficult, poor creature. Since my husband's passing, she cannot manage the least strain. I have arranged out of pure duty for her immediate marriage to a gentleman capable of overseeing her affairs." A chill slid down Barbara's back. Immediate gentleman! She knew exactly whom that meant. Mr. Ellery's expression didn't change, but his pen stilled. From the corridor came the sound of approaching footsteps. The Duke appeared in the doorway. "To whom?" he asked. "Has this marriage been arranged?" Lady Nielsen turned and transformed in an instant into injured dignity. "Your Grace, forgive this intrusion. Family matter only. Mr. Pike has offered most generously to relieve certain obligations and provide Miss Nielsen with a secure household." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "Pike? The same Pike seen near my lower paddocks last Tuesday?" Colour flickered at Lady Nielsen's throat. "I cannot account for every walk a gentleman takes." "Indeed?" He looked from her to Barbara and back. "Miss Nielsen remains here until I dismiss her." "That is impossible!" Lady Nielsen hissed, composure fraying. "You cannot keep her. Think of propriety." "I am thinking of criminal interference with my property and attempted coercion of a witness." His voice cooled another degree. "If you prefer, we may discuss propriety before a magistrate by supper." Silence dropped hard into the room. Lady Nielsen's gloved hands tightened around her reticule. "You overstep, Your Grace." "So do thieves." For one wild second, Barbara thought her stepmother might strike her in front of them all. Instead, Lady Nielsen gave a brittle smile that showed no warmth at all. "Very well, keep her for your questions, but do not be misled by gratitude. She is practised at eliciting sympathy." When she was gone, the air seemed cleaner and colder together. Adrian regarded Barbara for a moment. "Do you have somewhere safe to sleep tonight?" The question nearly undid her, not because of tenderness, there was none in his tone, but because no one had asked it in years. "I have my room at the townhouse," she said carefully, "which may now be unsafe if your account inconveniences the wrong men." He glanced to Mr. Ellery. "Prepare the blue guest chamber. Miss Nielsen is under my protection pending inquiry." Barbara stiffened. "Under protection is not the same as under guard, I hope." One corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile. "That depends on whether you attempt to leave by the servants' gate." She held his gaze. "I do not run from facts, Your Grace." "Good," he said, "because facts are all that will matter." Later, long after tea had gone cold on a side table and statements had been copied, Barbara sat alone by the chamber fire with her hands folded in her lap. Beyond the window, dusk pooled over the city. Somewhere in the house, men were sorting recovered tack and comparing signatures on stable receipts. Somewhere else, Lady Nielsen was deciding how to salvage herself. Barbara thought of the townhouse ledgers she had glimpsed these past months, when ordered to fetch sealed packets. Odd payments entered as coal and linen in sums too neat to be real. Repeated initials beside dates that matched missing horses and missing grooms. She thought of Mr. Pike's yellow gloves, of forged debt notes with her name hinted over them like a noose, of a duke who looked at her birthmark as if it had opened a locked door. Stillness is not surrender, she reminded herself. When the maid came to ask whether she needed anything, Barbara requested only paper, ink, and a candle that would burn late. Tonight, if she could manage it, she would begin copying numbers from memory before sleep stole them. If the men who stole horses and bought wives believed her plain and useless, let them keep believing it one day longer. The maid returned with a lap desk, a fresh bottle of ink, and 2 candles thick enough to outlast midnight. Barbara thanked her, waited until the door clicked shut, then crossed to the small escritoire by the fire and sat very straight, as if posture alone could hold weariness at bay. She untied the blood-stiff scarf from her wrist and set it aside. Beneath, the birthmark looked darker than usual against skin rubbed red by cold and rope leather. She flexed her fingers once, dipped the pen and began to write. Not names first, amounts, £3.12, entered twice in 1 week as lamp oil. £7, odd pence, listed as winter coal, though no delivery cart had come to the service gate. 15 guineas under repairs, initials only, R.P. She wrote as her father had trained her, each number clean, each line ruled by hand with a knife edge and care. When she faltered, she closed her eyes and rebuilt the page from memory. Date column, supplier, notation, hand pressure in Lady Nielsen's slanted script, where impatience made the final stroke bite through paper. By the second candle she had 5 pages covered, and a list in the margin of entries that needed original proof. A knock sounded, soft but unmistakably official. "Come in!" Mr. Ellery entered with a tray she had not requested. Broth, bread, and a folded note sealed in dark green wax. "From His Grace," he said. "He asks that you eat before discussing further matters. He also asks whether you require a physician for your wrist." "I require sleep eventually," Barbara said, setting down her pen, "and news of the stable boy." "He is alive. Dr. Hales stitched the wound. He names one assailant by scar and one by voice, though he cannot yet swear to either in court." Relief came so sharply she had to set both hands flat on the desk. "Thank you." Mr. Ellery's gaze dropped to her pages. He did not touch them. "You have an accountant's hand." "My father taught me." "So I am beginning to hear." He inclined his head toward the note. "His Grace requested your presence in the West Study when you are finished here. Now, Miss Nielsen." She broke the seal after he left. "If you are willing, bring whatever you have begun. A.V., no flourish, no title, just initials and instruction." She gathered the pages before she could overthink the impropriety of carrying household accusations through a duke's corridors after dark. The West Study was on the ground floor, panelled in oak, gone nearly black with age, its windows curtained against the street. Adrian stood by the hearth, reading a document held close to the lamp. He looked up as she entered. "You wrote quickly," he said. "I wrote urgently." He gestured to the desk. "Show me." Barbara laid the papers down in careful order. "These are from memory. Some I have watched entered over months. Some I copied before tonight and concealed." At his slight shift of attention, she added, "Not from your household. From Lady Nielsen's." He came around the desk and scanned the first page. He read fast, lips flattening with each line. "R.P., he said. "Pike. I believe so. Belief is wind. I need proof." "I know," she swallowed. "There are originals, receipts in the townhouse writing room and copied bills in Lady Nielsen's locked bureau. I can identify both." "Can you retrieve them?" "If she has not burned them already." Adrian set the page down, fingers resting lightly on the edge as if pinning a map. "I sent 2 men to observe your house after she left here. A cart arrived within the hour. 3 trunks were loaded and sent to an address in Clerkenwell tied to Pike." Barbara felt the floor tilt for a breath. "Then she has moved the papers." "Perhaps some, not all. Panic makes people thorough in the wrong places." His gaze cut to her. "Why didn't you come sooner?" The question landed harder than accusation would have. Why hadn't she? Because fear learned young calcified into habit. Because no one had asked for facts. They asked for silence. Because each day survival consumed the next. "Because until this afternoon," she said evenly, I had no one likely to believe the numbers over a title. His expression did not soften, but something in it shifted from scepticism to appraisal. Belief is still not the issue, evidence is. Then let us collect it before dawn. He studied her another moment, then rang for a servant. Orders followed in clipped precision. 2 trusted riders to the townhouse with warrants prepared through his solicitor. A constable contacted discreetly. A clerk roused from bed. Barbara listened, strangely steady now that there was work. When the orders were sent, Adrian said, "You will remain here. Your men won't know which ledger is decoy and which is genuine. Then you will describe it. I can do more than describe it. Miss Nielsen," his tone hardened, "if Pike's men are involved, I will not parade you into a room where you can be threatened or bought." "Bought?" Her laugh was brief and sharp. "By whom? I have already been priced this week." Silence flashed between them. He looked as if he regretted the word the instant it left him, then locked the regret away. At last he said, "Then threatened. The point stands." Barbara lifted her chin. "I did not bring your horse home to be tucked behind curtains now." "No," he said quietly. "You brought him home because you act before fear catches up." She had no answer for that. He dismissed her with a promise of reports before morning. Back in the blue chamber she ate 3 spoonfuls of broth out of obedience rather than appetite, and returned to her pages. At some hour when the fire had collapsed to red coals, footsteps and low voices passed in the corridor. She waited until they faded, then wrote 2 more names she had never spoken aloud. Croft, for receiving envelopes. Hale, not the physician, but a groom dismissed last spring after drunkenness and suddenly well-dressed by summer. By dawn, her wrist cramped and her candles guttered. At 7, Mr. Ellery returned with mud on his boots and soot on one cuff. "Your recollection proved useful," he said, without preamble. The bureau in Lady Nielsen's room was cleared. The writing-room grate was warm, though no fire should have been lit overnight. We recovered partially burned papers from ash. "Partially?" Barbara's breath snagged. "Enough to establish recent destruction." "Not enough yet to hang anyone." He placed a cloth-wrapped bundle on the table. "These were found under loose floorboard in what appears to have been your former schoolroom." Barbara stared. "My schoolroom? So the maid called it." Hands suddenly unsteady, she unwrapped the bundle. Inside lay 2 receipt books, smoke-stained but intact, and a narrow account ledger in her father's old binding style. Cheap calfskin with reinforced spine, the sort he favoured for working records. The first page bore his script, unmistakable. Outgoing disbursements held in trust, pending settlement. Her throat closed. Mr. Ellery watched, awkward for the first time. "His Grace asked me to say, these are now secured in his strong room. You may examine copies in his presence." "In his presence," she repeated. "He does not yet know whether you are witness, target, or—" He stopped. "Or trap." He gave a grim little nod. "He has been wrong before when he trusted quickly." Barbara traced one finger over her father's handwriting without touching ink. "And if he trusts slowly, then fewer people die of it." By noon, the household had turned taut. Footmen carried messages at a near run. A stranger from Bow Street conferred with Adrian behind closed doors. Twice Barbara saw men she did not know posted at side entrances. She was given breakfast she barely tasted, and instructed, politely, firmly, not to leave the West Wing unaccompanied. The first complication arrived wrapped in civility. A note from Lady Nielsen, delivered by a messenger in Nielsen livery, requested Barbara's immediate return for the sake of family dignity, and warned that any statement made while in a state of nervous agitation would be legally contested. The note ended with a line in different ink, sharper hand. Mr. Pike does not enjoy being embarrassed. Adrian read it once and passed it to Mr. Ellery. File it with threats. It is not a threat, Barbara said. His eyes flicked to her. No, it is a promise. He held her gaze a beat, then said to Ellery, Double the men at the Mews. No one enters without my order. The second complication came in person. Near evening, as rain began needling the windows, Mrs. Croft appeared in the outer hall, insisting she had private female concerns to deliver to Miss Neilson. Her bonnet dripped. Her face looked older, collapsed inward with strain. Adrian permitted the meeting only in the morning room with 2 maids within call. Barbara entered first. Mrs. Croft stood as if before a magistrate, twisting wet gloves. You shouldn't have come, Barbara said. Nor you neither, to this house, Mrs. Croft muttered, then thrust a folded paper toward her. Her ladyship said, Give you this, and keep my mouth shut. Barbara opened it. A debt note. Her name forged in clumsy imitation, binding her to Mr. Pike for a sum impossible to repay, with consent to marriage settlement in lieu of payment. She means to claim I signed this willingly, Barbara said. Mrs. Croft's eyes flicked up, fearful and guilty. She means to claim many things. She told the solicitor you go wandering at night and forget your own words by morning. Told him your mother had episodes. Told him if anyone asks, you're grateful for Mr. Pike's protection. My mother died of fever, Barbara said, each word precise. I know that, miss. Mrs. Croft's voice cracked. I told her it was wicked. She said wicked keeps roofs over heads. Barbara folded the forged note once, twice. Why bring this to me? Mrs. Croft gave a humourless laugh. Because I scrubbed your nursery floors when you were 5, and because your father paid my son's apprenticeship when no one else would, because I can't sleep. She drew a shaking breath. And because there's a packet hidden behind the second loose brick in the scullery yard. She told Pike's man to fetch it tonight if rain held off. Before Barbara could answer, voices rose in the corridor. Mr. Ellery appeared at the door, face controlled but tight. Miss Neilson, His Grace asks you to the library at once. Barbara turned back, but Mrs. Croft had already stepped away, eyes fixed on the carpet, as if distance could erase what she had done. In the library, Adrian stood beside a long table, laid with recovered papers, sealing wax, 2 candelabra, and an object wrapped in linen like something fragile from an archive. Rain rattled the glass. He dismissed the clerk when Barbara entered and waited until the door shut. Sit, he said. She remained standing. Mrs. Croft just brought me a forged debt note and word of a hidden packet in the scullery yard. I know. Ellery is sending men now. He touched the linen-wrapped object. Before the next wave of denials begins, there is something you must see. Barbara's stomach tightened. If this is about proving I'm a liar, you needn't trouble. Lady Neilson has done it already. A flicker. Impatience maybe, or something rougher. This is about why I asked your name as if it mattered. He unwrapped the linen. Inside lay a letter, paper-yellowed, edges repaired with painstaking care. The hand was elegant, old-fashioned, feminine. My mother wrote this 13 years ago to my father's steward, Adrian said. It was filed among estate correspondence after her death. I found it this afternoon when I could not place what I recognised. He turned the letter so she could read. Her eyes caught at once on the line where ink had faded, then darkened under later tracing. If ever Mr. Neilson's brave little daughter should be left without proper protection, Mariston House is to stand for her. She is the child with the swallow mark upon her wrist, who led Adrian's pony from the ditch and refused a sovereign as if she were already a queen. Barbara read it twice before the words settled into meaning. I was 8, she whispered. Your pony slipped near the river road. You were shouting at everyone and bleeding from your lip. Adrian gave a short, surprised breath that might almost have been a laugh. I remember shouting. I did not remember you until yesterday. Only the mark. His gaze dropped briefly to her wrist, then back. My mother never forgot people who stood their ground. She wrote instructions. After she died, my father dismissed half her letters as sentimental clutter. This one survived because the steward disobeyed him. Barbara looked down at the old script again. Her father's name preserved in another woman's careful hand. A promise made before everything had narrowed and gone dark. She felt, absurdly, as if a wall in her chest had shifted an inch and let in air. All these years, she said, he had secured connections, safeguards. Lady Nielsen told me no one wished to be bothered with a shipping man's daughter. Lady Nielsen had reason to isolate you, Adrian said. An isolated witness is manageable. Barbara set the letter down very gently. When she looked up, her eyes were clear. I won't be managed now. Good. She reached into the pocket sewn inside her skirt and drew out a tied bundle of folded sheets, the pages she had copied over months in cramped candlelight, each entry matched where possible to dates of missing tack and suspicious visitors. She placed them on the table beside his mother's letter. These are not all I have, she said, but enough to begin dismantling them. Adrian rested his palm on the top page without opening it. You're handing me leverage. I'm offering terms. Her voice didn't shake. You may use my evidence to break this ring. In return, no arrangement is made over my head, legal, financial, or personal. I speak for myself before any magistrate. I see every statement before it is filed. And if your men recover papers from the townhouse, I examine them before anyone decides what they mean. The rain beat harder against the windows. For a long moment he said nothing. Then Adrian Vale, Duke of Mariston, inclined his head once, as if accepting terms from an equal across a negotiating table rather than from a mud-spattered woman his house could have swallowed without trace. Agreed, he said. Agreed, he said. The word had barely settled between them when the library door opened without ceremony. Mr. Ellery stepped in, rainwater darkening his shoulders, one glove half off as if removed mid-stride. Forgive the interruption, Your Grace. The men return from the scullery yard. Adrian's hand left Barbara's pages. Well? They found the packet behind the brick, exactly where Mrs. Croft said. Ellery held up an oilskin-wrapped bundle tied with twine. And someone followed them from the mews. Barbara felt the first sharp turn of unease in her chest. Followed! One rider kept a shadow until Holborn, then broke off when he realised he'd been seen. Ellery set the bundle down. There is more. A Bow Street runner arrived while I was on the steps. Mr. Pike lodged a complaint this evening alleging unlawful detention of a female dependent, Miss Nielsen, by this household, plus theft of valuables from Lady Nielsen's private rooms. Barbara let out a breath that was almost a laugh. He is accusing me of theft while moving stolen tack through Clerkenwell? He is accusing you of instability, Ellery said. He attached 2 sworn statements from servants claiming you remove papers from desks, wander at night, and destroy household accounts in fits. Croft, Barbara asked. One unsigned, one from a kitchen maid who can barely spell her own name and who has nevertheless produced neat legal phrasing. Ellery's mouth tightened. Purchase testimony. Adrian broke the oilskin tie and spread the packet's contents across the table. Receipts, a folded set of betting slips, a narrow page in Lady Nielsen's hand listing initials, sums and dates. One entry matched exactly a day Mariston tack had vanished from the lower paddock. For one heartbeat relief broke through. Then Adrian lifted the last sheet, a debt instrument with Barbara's forged signature beneath terms of immediate marital settlement, to Reginald Pike. "They're building 2 roads to the same place," Barbara said quietly. "If they cannot buy me, they will discredit me. If they cannot discredit me, they will claim legal right over me." Adrian's jaw set. "They will do neither." Ellery cleared his throat. "The runner requested an answer tonight. If we refuse, Pike petitions for constables at dawn." "Then we don't refuse," Barbara said before Adrian could speak. "I am not being hidden in your house like contraband. Send reply that I remain here of my own will as witness in an active theft inquiry." Adrian looked at her. "You are certain? I'm tired of being represented by people whose interests require my silence." Ellery nodded once, as if a private calculation had resolved. "I'll draft it." He gathered the statements from Pike's complaint and hesitated. "Your Grace, there is also word from Dr. Hales. The stable boy has regained enough strength to speak in full tomorrow. Hales advises immediate deposition before memory blurs." Barbara said, "Then we take it tonight." "Not safely," Adrian said at once. "It's near 10. Rain, narrow lanes, and now we know they're watching the house." Barbara met him evenly. "If Pike reaches that boy first, we lose a witness who saw faces and heard names. We may already have lost him if this complaint is a distraction." The room went still. Ellery said, "I can send 2 men ahead to secure the surgery and hold the lane." Quietly. Adrian considered only a second. "Do it, and bring Sergeant Vale from Bow Street." He turned to Barbara. "You do not step outside without me." She might have argued on principle. She did not argue now. By the time they reached Dr. Hales's surgery, the rain had thinned to mist and the street lamps burned in halos. The brass plate on the door glinted dull. One of Ellery's men waited under the awning, hat brim low, expression wrong. "He's gone," the man said. Barbara moved before she meant to. "Gone where?" "Doctor says 2 gentlemen came an hour ago with a carriage and written order to transfer the boy to St. Bartholomew's for observation. Paper bore a city seal. Hales let him go." "Forgery," Adrian said flatly. Inside, Dr. Hales wrung his hands until his knuckles blanched. He swore the order looked proper, swore the men knew the boy's name and wound details, swore one carried a constable's truncheon. Under questioning, he admitted 1 gentleman had yellow gloves. Barbara closed her eyes briefly. Pike. Sergeant Vale took statements and sent runners to the hospital and nearby turnpikes. They found nothing by midnight. No transfer record. No carriage matching the description. No injured stable boy admitted under any name. When they returned to Mariston House, a second blow was waiting. The strong room lock stood open. Not broken, opened, clean as if by proper key. Mr. Ellery was white with controlled fury. "We checked all outer doors, no sign of forced entry. Whoever did this had access or copied the mechanism." On the long table in Adrian's office lay the inventory. Mariston stable registers, recovered forged debt notes, 2 of Barbara's copied pages, and, most crucially, her father's original trust ledger from the schoolroom bundle. Missing. In their place, neatly centred like an insult, someone had left a single card from Pike's gaming room, a queen of spades pierced through with a hatpin. For a moment Barbara simply stared. Her father's handwriting, gone again. Proof of disbursements held in trust. Proof Lady Neilson had diverted funds and falsified liabilities. Gone into wet London dark by hands that knew exactly what to take. "I should have kept it with me," she said too quietly. Adrian snapped. "No!" She flinched more from the rawness in his voice than the volume. He drew a breath, visibly mastering himself. "This is not your fault. It is mine," he said. "My security, my men, my house." "And my evidence," she said, "which now exists as copies made by the woman Pike, calls unstable." Mr. Ellery spoke without looking up from the inventory. "Not all is lost. We have the scullery packet, partially burned fragments, Pike's complaint implying motive to silence, and your memory." "Memory is attacked first in court," Barbara replied, "especially in women." Nobody contradicted her. At 2 a.m, another message arrived. Mrs. Croft had not returned home. Her room above the Nielsen kitchens was untouched, bed unslept in, trunk open. The kitchen maid who had signed Pike's statement had also vanished. That one could not be called coincidence. By dawn, exhaustion had become a physical ache behind Barbara's eyes, but sleep would not come. Every time she closed them, she saw the empty place on the strong room inventory where her father's ledger should have been. She sat in the blue chamber window seat while grey light crawled over the square. For the first time since she stepped in front of the stolen horse, doubt found a way in. Not doubt in the figures, in herself. What if she had mistaken sequence? What if one transposed digit let Pike's solicitor shred everything? What if her insistence on speaking, on terms, on being present, had made Adrian hesitate at some practical step that would have secured the originals? Pride could be another kind of blindness. Her father had told her so once when she was 16 and refused to admit a column error until midnight proved him right. A knock came. She expected a maid. Adrian entered instead, coat off, waistcoat unbuttoned, as if he had forgotten he was ever impeccably arranged. "You should rest," he said. "So should you." "I don't sleep when my house is breached." Neither did she, apparently, but she did not say it. He held out a folded page. "Draft of our response to Pike's complaint. Read it." She scanned quickly. "Statement of voluntary residence. Notice of active investigation. Request for immediate protective order against coercive marital claim pending inquiry." It was tight, legal, and colder than winter iron. At the bottom, he had left space for her signature, not taken for granted. Asked, Barbara signed. As she handed it back, her fingers brushed his. "If this fails," she said, "I lose more than a case. I become exactly what they said, unreliable, ungrateful, troublesome, fit to be decided for." His expression changed, minute but unmistakable. "If this fails," he said, "I fail a dead woman's instruction and a living woman's trust in the same week. I am not permitting either." He left before she could answer, and something in his voice followed her long after the door shut. Adrian did not go to bed. He stood alone in the west study while dawn sharpened the edges of the maps on the wall and tried, unsuccessfully, to slow the churn in his head. On the desk lay 3 objects in a line: his mother's letter, Pike's complaint, and the Queen of Spades. He had spent years building his life around control, because control had once seemed the only defence against ruin. At 19, he had trusted his father's stable master with breeding accounts and transport routes. Within months, 3 horses disappeared. 1 groom was found with his skull broken near Finchley, and Adrian's younger brother had ridden an underfed mount to prove a point, fallen at a hedge, and never stood again. The stable master fled. His father called it bad luck. Adrian called it what it was: trust misplaced, cost paid in blood. After that, he trusted paper, locks, and his own vigilance. People were variables killed. And yet Barbara Nielsen had walked into his yard soaked in rain and someone else's blood, placed her body in front of a panicked stallion, and then asked first for a stable boy's physician, not favour. She had offered evidence with terms, not tears. She had looked at him when most people angled for his title and not his judgment. That should have made her easy to assess. Instead, she unsettled every rule he relied on. A soft knock, Ellery entered without waiting long enough for permission, which meant the matter was personal. "You look like your father," the steward said bluntly. "When he realised too late he was wrong about someone." Adrian's laugh was brief and humourless. "Comforting!" "I didn't mean comfort." Ellery closed the door behind him. "I meant warning. You are treating this as a theft case with appendages. It is now a containment war. Pike does not need to win in court if he can break her first. I am aware." "Are you?" Ellery stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Because from where I stand you are guarding her like evidence, not like a person." The words landed clean and unwelcome. Adrian looked down at his mother's letter, at the line naming a brave little girl with a swallow-marked wrist. He remembered almost nothing of that day beyond mud, anger, and a small hand on a pony's rein that did not shake. He remembered his mother kneeling to Barbara's height afterward, speaking to her as if rank did not exist between children. He remembered envying that ease and then spending 20 years pretending he did not. "What would you have me do?" he said quietly. "I cannot promise safety I may not be able to provide." "No," Ellery said, "but you can stop pretending indifference is protection." Adrian said nothing. Ellery's gaze dropped to the Queen of Spades. "One of our own opened that strong room. Find him before Pike uses him twice." He straightened. "And your Grace? If Miss Nielsen asks for truth, give it before she has to drag it out of you with ledgers." When he had gone, Adrian sat at the desk and pressed thumb and forefinger to his eyes until sparks flared behind them. He was tired in the marrow, angry in ways that made precision difficult, and afraid. There was no point lying to himself now, afraid that by the time he untangled proof from Ash, Barbara would already be legally cornered beyond easy rescue. He folded his mother's letter once and slipped it into his inner pocket, close enough to feel through cloth. Then he rose and went to find Barbara, not as Duke to witness, but as man to woman, because Ellery was right. She was not evidence. By noon, the house had become a fortress under polite siege. 2 constables arrived first with formal notice, requiring Barbara's appearance before Magistrate Fenwick on allegations of theft, document tampering, and self-endangerment under compromised mental judgment. The phrasing was almost elegant in its cruelty. If accepted, it could place temporary control of her person and property in a guardian's hands pending review. Pike had named himself willing guardian through marriage contract. Barbara read the notice once and set it down. "He is trying to get me declared incompetent before the theft hearing begins." "Fenwick is susceptible to reputation," Adrian said. "He likes orderly widows and dislikes scandal." "Then we must bring him disorder with arithmetic." A footman appeared in the doorway, pale. "Your Grace, beg pardon, there are men at the back gate, not constables. They say they carry a private message for Miss Nielsen from her stepmother." "Send them away," Adrian said. The footman swallowed. "They brought a trunk, sir. Said if we do not open it in Miss Nielsen's presence, they will leave it in the street and call witnesses." Ellery swore under his breath. "Don't touch it!" They moved to the service courtyard anyway. Adrian, Ellery, 2 grooms with cudgels, Barbara at Adrian's shoulder despite his clipped instruction to remain inside. The men at the gate had already gone. Rain dripped from the trunk lid. No marking except a shipping tag tied with black ribbon. Barbara saw the tag first and went cold. The handwriting was her father's, or looked like it. Adrian caught her wrist before she stepped closer. No. It could be one of his account chests. It could be powder and nails. Bow Street men were summoned. The courtyard emptied to distance and held breath while Sergeant Vale knelt, listened, pried, and finally lifted the lid with a hooked pole. Inside lay not explosives but paper, dozens of loose sheets, some genuine household bills, some obvious forgeries, all soaked around the edges as if dragged through gutter water to blur ink. On top sat a sealed envelope addressed to Magistrate Fenwick, bearing what appeared to be Barbara's signature. She broke the seal with steady hands and read in silence. Her face did not change, but when she handed the letter to Adrian, her fingers were ice cold. It was a confession, detailed, plausible, viciously crafted. In it, Barbara admitted conspiring with Mariston's staff to stage the horse theft, gain entry to ducal records, and extort Lady Nielsen through fabricated debts. It included intimate details from inside both households, enough truth threaded through lies to make denial look convenient. At the bottom, in a careful imitation of her hand, was written, "I submit myself to Mr. Pike's honourable protection to avoid public disgrace." Ellery said, "Christ!" Sergeant Vale examined the signature and grimaced. "Good forgery to untrained eye. In a rushed hearing. Could do damage." Adrian's voice went very quiet. "Where is Mrs. Croft?" "No sign." "And the stable boy?" "Still missing." The clock in the hall struck 1. Fenwick's preliminary session was at 3. Barbara took the confession back and read it again, as if memorising an enemy map. When she looked up, her eyes were dark and entirely awake. "This is the final move before court," she said. "He means to bury me under noise so no one hears numbers." Adrian stepped closer. "Then we make them hear." "Without originals? Without Croft? Without the boy?" He did not answer quickly enough. From the gate came a shout, then the clatter of hooves. A messenger in Bow Street colours rode straight into the yard and jumped down before the horse stopped fully. "Your Grace, Sergeant, urgent from Fenwick's clerk." He thrust out a folded order, breathing hard. "Additional warrant issued. Authority to seize all documents related to Miss Nielsen from Mariston House and take Miss Nielsen into immediate custody pending evaluation if she fails to appear at 3. Ellery snatched the paper, scanned and went still. "Signed and sealed." Barbara felt the world narrow to a single brutal line of fact. If she walked into court, Pike's trap could close. If she did not, the law would close it for him. Adrian looked from the warrant to her face, and for once the control he wore like armour did not hide what it cost him. "We leave in 30 minutes," he said. Outside, thunder rolled over London like distant artillery. Thunder rolled again as the Mariston carriage turned toward Bow Street, wheels striking wet ruts hard enough to jolt teeth. Inside, Barbara sat opposite Adrian and Sergeant Vale, the warrant in her lap, the forged confession folded beside it like a snake she had decided not to fear. Mr. Ellery rode ahead with the document cases. No one wasted words. Rain streaked the glass. London passed in blurred grey stone and soot. At one corner, Adrian said quietly, "You may still choose not to answer questions not directly put to you." Barbara kept her eyes on the warrant seal. "If I wait to be asked what matters, Pike chooses the shape of truth." His mouth tightened, but he nodded. "Then choose your moment." By the time they reached the magistrate's building, the corridor outside Court 2 was already crowded. Solicitors, clerks, curious onlookers who smelled scandal as keenly as blood. The air held damp wool, sealing wax, wet boots. Lady Nielsen stood near the front in widow's black veil lowered just enough to imply fragile grief. Beside her, Reginald Pike wore yellow gloves and a smile like a bruise. When he saw Barbara, he tipped his head as if greeting a dinner guest. "Miss Nielsen, brave of you to appear." Barbara answered, "I dislike being spoken for." His smile thinned. Inside, Magistrate Fenwick sat high-backed and powdered, with the weary impatience of a man who preferred paperwork to people. He looked first at Adrian, then at Barbara, then at the docket. "Preliminary matters," he said. Complaint by Mr. Reginald Pike and Lady Nielsen against Miss Barbara Nielsen, with associated petition concerning Miss Nielsen's competence and custodial protection. Counter notice from His Grace the Duke of Mariston regarding witness coercion in theft conspiracy. He pinched the bridge of his nose. God save us all from fashionable criminality. Proceed. Pike's solicitor rose first, smooth and mournful. He spoke of a vulnerable young woman led astray by romantic notions of heroism, of document theft, of emotional instability, of ducal influence, however nobly intended. He produced the forged confession with a flourish and set it before the clerk. Lady Nielsen dabbed her eyes at exact intervals. When Barbara's turn came, Fenwick glanced down. "Miss Nielsen, do you deny this signature?" "I do." "On what basis?" "On the basis that it is not mine." A ripple of amusement ran through the back benches. Fenwick frowned. "We require more than assertion." Barbara lifted her chin. "Then allow me the paper." After a beat, Fenwick nodded. The clerk handed it down. Barbara held the confession at arm's length, then closer to the light. "This was written on Westcombe stock. Watermark, 1849. We did not purchase Westcombe paper at my father's house until last year, when Lady Nielsen changed stationer after gambling debts with Brewer and Holt. Any confession dated 18 months earlier cannot exist on paper, not yet in our rooms." A stillness moved across the court. Pike's solicitor snapped, "Speculation. She cannot know every sheet in a household." Barbara looked at him. "I kept the household stationery account from age 14 until my father died. Shall I recite the invoices?" Fenwick leaned forward, despite himself. "Can you?" "Yes, sir. March 4th. Reading cream laid, 2 reams. June 12th. Reading again, 1 ream, blotting folios. No Westcombe until October of last year. 4 quires charged under miscellaneous correspondence. Paid in cash through Mrs. Croft." The clerk's pen paused mid-scratch. Pike's solicitor recovered quickly. "Convenient memory." Barbara set the confession down. "Memory is all your clients left me when they stole my originals from Mariston's strong room." A hiss of whispers. Fenwick struck his desk. "Order!" The solicitor pivoted. "Ah, yes, stolen originals no one can produce. How useful! And this alleged theft occurred while Miss Nielsen resided voluntarily with His Grace, did it not? Under his protection." Adrian started to rise. Barbara touched his sleeve once, small, firm, and stepped forward herself. "Yes," she said, "under protection, not control. If you mean to imply the Duke forged my confession, you must explain why Mr. Pike filed this petition before the strong room breach occurred." The solicitor blinked. "Filed—" Barbara turned to Fenwick. "Your clerk stamped Pike's petition yesterday at 11 in the morning. The strong room was breached after 11 at night. Yet this confession references details from papers stolen only last night, specifically my private copy notation, RP, besides stable payments. That notation existed nowhere in Lady Nielsen's books. It existed only in my copies in Mariston custody." The room went dead quiet. Fenwick looked sharply to his clerk. "Timestamp?" The clerk, flustered, checked the docket. 11:03, sir." Barbara faced Pike now, not his solicitor. "You did not merely forge my hand, Mr. Pike. You used stolen material to improve your forgery and showed us when you got it." Pike's jaw flexed. "This is theatre." "Then let us discuss figures." She asked permission to approach the evidence table. Fenwick, eyes narrowed, allowed it. Mr. Ellery brought forward the scullery yard packet, and the partially burned fragments recovered from Lady Nielsen's grate. Barbara sorted them with practised fingers, paring torn edges, aligning dates. "Payment to R.P., 5 guineas, entered as coal," she said. "Same date, Mariston reports tack, missing from lower paddock." She laid down another. Payment to J.H., 3 guineas 12, entered as lamp oil. J.H. corresponds to Jacob Hale, dismissed groom later seen at Pike's Rooms. Another. Payment to Carter Services, £7 odd. No cart delivery logged at Nielsen Gate that week. Lady Nielsen burst up from her chair. You ungrateful girl! Those are household matters, not crimes! Barbara did not raise her voice. Household matters do not require forged marriage contracts and stolen horses. Pike's solicitor lunged for the pile. These scraps are inadmissible! He moved too fast, arms sweeping for the fragments. Adrian stepped between on instinct, catching the man's wrist, before paper scattered. A bench overturned. Someone shouted. Constables surged. Through the noise, Barbara's voice cut clean as glass. June 19th, £2.8 to Croft, linen. July 1st, 11 guineas to R.P., coal. July 4th, Mariston Bay, stallion attempted transfer through Covent Garden. July 4th, noon, stable boy struck. July 4th, evening. Lady Nielsen attempts immediate marriage settlement between me and Reginald Pike. July 5th, petition of incompetence prepared with language from Pike's solicitor. July 6th, forged confession on paper purchased only last year. Shall I continue, sir? Fenwick was on his feet now, face drained of boredom. Yes, he said hoarsely. Continue, Barbara did. Date by date, sum by sum, witness by witness. She named the kitchen maid paid to sign. She named the messenger who brought Pike's threat note. She named the clerk at Brewer and Holt who had refused further credit without collateral and received her stepmother's promise of the girl's settlement. She named, finally, the stable-yard porter at Mariston who had access to keys and suddenly acquired a silver watch he could not afford. At that, Sergeant Vale snapped his head toward one of the men standing near Pike's bench, a porter in borrowed respectability already edging toward the door. "Hold him!" the man bolted. 2 constables tackled him before he reached the corridor. Fenwick slammed his palm down hard enough to rattle inkpots. "This hearing is no longer civil petition. It is criminal inquiry. Mr. Pike, Lady Nielsen, you will remain in custody pending examination." Lady Nielsen made a strangled sound. "You cannot. I am a widow of standing fraud, perhaps." Fenwick pointed at her with shaking irritation. "Sit down." Pike did not sit. He smiled, teeth bared now. "You have scraps and a girl's recitation. Nothing ties me to horse theft." From the back of the court came a ragged voice. "I can." Every head turned. The missing stable boy stood in the doorway, bandage yellow at one temple, supported by Dr. Hales and a Bow Street runner. He looked half-starved, half-feral, and fully furious. "That one," he said, pointing at Pike with a trembling hand. "Yellow gloves told t'other to hit me if I shouted. Called him Jacob. Said move Mariston's Bay before dusk." Pike's colour changed for the first time. Fenwick stared at the boy, then at Sergeant Vale. "Where was he found?" "Locked in an outbuilding behind Pike's gaming rooms," Vale said. "Tip came 20 minutes ago from a woman calling herself Croft." Barbara's breath caught. Alive, then. Hidden, but alive. Pike snapped. "Lies bought by Mariston money." The boy spat blood-tinged saliva onto the floorboards at Pike's polished boot. "I'd rather starve than be bought by you." Constables moved in. Pike jerked, tried to wrench free, and shouted over them. "This isn't finished, Barbara. You think you've won because a magistrate likes sums." Barbara held his gaze. "No, I think I've won because numbers remember what men try to bury." Lady Nielsen collapsed into a chair, Vale askew, and began to sob in earnest now, not graceful tears, but panicked gasps. "Barbara, tell them you were confused. You can still come home." Barbara looked at the woman who had kept her on cold stone and called it discipline, who had priced her body against debt. "I am home nowhere you command," she said. Fenwick ordered both defendants removed. Pike fought until a constable twisted his arm higher, and he finally hissed in pain. Lady Nielsen went limp and had to be half carried, muttering that she was being persecuted by servants and lunatics. The courtroom noise swelled, then thinned as doors slammed. Only when the bench emptied did Barbara realise her knees were shaking. Adrian stepped close, but did not touch her until she nodded once. Then his hand settled lightly at her back, steady as a wall. "Miss Nielsen," Fenwick called before she could leave. His voice had lost its earlier condescension. "You will submit formal sworn statement tomorrow, and you will bring those account reconstructions." "I will," Barbara said. He hesitated. "For what it is worth, your arithmetic just saved this court from making a grievous error." Barbara gave a tired, almost incredulous breath. "For what it is worth, sir, arithmetic has been trying to tell everyone for months." The corridor outside smelled of rain and ink and human relief. Reporters hovered like crows. Ellery intercepted two and sent them away with a stare sharp enough to cut to cloth. Barbara leaned against the stone wall and pressed her fingertips to her eyes. The world had not gone quiet. If anything, it had grown louder, but the immediate threat, the legal net designed to drag her under, had torn open. Sergeant Vale approached with his notebook. "Update. Pike's porter is named Latham. He's singing already. Says Pike ordered strongroom breach, paid him through intermediary at gaming rooms. Claims Lady Nielsen supplied key impressions in sealing wax." Barbara lowered her hands. "And Mrs. Croft?" "Runner's gone to fetch her. She left word at a parish pump, then vanished again. Likely frightened." "She should be," Barbara exhaled. "But she came through." Vale nodded. "So did you." When he moved off, Adrian remained beside her, silent long enough that she looked up. His face was composed, but not cold. Something had cracked there, controlled still, yet unmistakably human. "You were extraordinary," he said. She gave a short laugh that turned unsteadily into something like tears. She refused. "I was terrified." "Those are not opposites." The statement landed deeper than she expected. A clerk from Fenwick's office hurried over with documents. "Interim order, Your Grace. Miss Nielsen released from all custodial petitions. Financial authority of Lady Nielsen suspended pending prosecution. Temporary injunction against any marriage claim by Mr. Pike." Barbara took the paper, read each line and read it again because freedom in ink looked almost as unreal as captivity had. "No guardian," she murmured. "No guardian," Adrian confirmed. In the carriage back to Mariston House, she held the order in both hands and stared out at London in late afternoon wet light. Washerwomen arguing by a pump, a bookseller closing shutters, children skidding through puddles. Ordinary life continuing, ignorant of what had nearly been signed away in a courtroom. Halfway across the Strand, she said, "When Pike looked at me, he still believed I would fold if he pushed hard enough." Adrian watched her profile. "He mistakes stillness for weakness." "So did everyone." She turned to him, gaze steady despite exhaustion. "You too, at first." "Yes," he said, no defence in it. "I did." That honesty loosened something knotted tight under her ribs. Back at Mariston, the servant's posture had shifted. No longer wary curiosity, but a kind of respectful alertness. News travelled fast. Mrs. Gray, the housekeeper, met Barbara at the stair and said simply, "Tea in the west sitting-room, miss. Strong." Barbara nearly smiled. "Bless you." She drank one cup, then another, and only when dusk settled did the shaking return in earnest, sudden and uncontrollable. The teaspoon rattled against china. She set it down before anyone could pretend not to hear. Adrian, who had been standing by the mantel reading dispatches, crossed the room and crouched in front of her chair so she had to look at him. "Breathe," he said quietly. In, hold, out. She obeyed once, twice, until the edges of the room stopped blurring. I am so angry, she whispered, surprised by the rawness of it. Not just with them. With every day I thought enduring was the same as surviving, he nodded. Anger after danger is the body refusing to go numb. A tear escaped despite her, and she brushed it away, annoyed. I dislike weeping in front of dukes. Then consider me demoted for the evening. She laughed wetly at that, then covered her face with both hands and let herself feel the crash. Fear delayed, rage delayed, grief delayed for the father whose ledgers had nearly burned away. When she dropped her hands, Adrian was still there, still waiting. Tomorrow, she said, voice rough, I give sworn deposition. I want copies filed in 3 places, not 1. Done. And Mrs. Croft gets counsel before she speaks, or Pike's men will hang the whole ring on her. Done. And if anyone proposes I retire quietly for my nerves, I will personally throw them out, he said. That earned a real smile, tired and brief, but real. 2 nights later, after depositions and identifications and a relentless parade of legal detail, Barbara found Adrian in the West Garden just past 10, coatless in the cold, staring at the dark yews as if they had offended him personally. The house behind them hummed with muffled activity. Inside, Ellery and solicitors were drafting charges. Outside, the air smelled of wet earth and distant coal smoke. You should be indoors, Barbara said. So should you. She came to stand beside him. For a while they listened to the city breathe. Then Adrian said, without preamble, My brother died because I trusted the wrong man with a stable key. Barbara turned, startled by the bluntness. He kept his gaze on the gravel path. I was 19, he went on, arrogant enough to think vigilance was unnecessary if one gave clear orders. He was 17. He worshipped risk. Rode a horse that had been switched and underfed to settle someone's account. It stumbled at a hedge. He broke his spine. Adrian swallowed once, hard. After that, I decided trust was sentimental and therefore dangerous. Barbara said softly, That is not sentiment, that is grief. Perhaps. He gave a bitter half smile. Either way, I have spent 11 years rewarding predictability and punishing vulnerability. It made me effective. It did not make me good. She studied him in profile. The formidable duke stripped of ceremony by darkness and honesty. You were good when you believed I might be part of a trap and still sent a physician for the boy, she said. You were good when you signed space for my name instead of deciding for me. He shook his head. I was late. You did the dangerous part. Because I had practice. Now he looked at her fully. I don't want to be another man arranging your life because he thinks he knows better. I also don't know how to stand beside you without trying to shield every edge. Barbara folded her hands to keep from reaching for him too quickly. Then ask before shielding. His laugh was quiet, astonished. So simple. No, repeatedly inconvenient. She held his eyes. But possible. A long pause. Then Adrian took a breath as if stepping off a height. I love you, he said. No polish, no flourish, just the truth, rough with use. I loved you, I think, from the moment you asked for a physician before your own release. I respected you before I understood you. And I have been afraid to say any of it, because wanting someone gives them power to break what little order you trust. Barbara felt the words like a hand at her sternum, steadying and undoing her both. I have been afraid, she answered, that if I loved anyone with power, I would disappear inside his decisions. That gratitude would be demanded as obedience. She stepped closer. I do love you, but I will not be kept. Not kindly, not fiercely, not for my own good. Then don't be. His voice shook once, almost imperceptibly. "Be with me instead." He reached into his coat pocket and drew out a small velvet box, then stopped himself before opening it. "May I?" he asked. She stared at him, then laughed softly at the absurd sweetness of that single question from a man raised to command continence. "Yes, you may." Inside lay not an ostentatious diamond, but a ring of old gold set with a small sapphire the exact deep blue of Mariston livery. "It was my mother's riding ring," he said. "She wore it when she inspected schools and stables and terrified half the county into honesty. I thought you might prefer history to spectacle." Barbara held out her left hand. "I prefer being known." He slid the ring on. It fit as if it had waited. "When this is announced," he said, "the Ton will call it surprising." "They call anything surprising when a woman refuses to be ruined on schedule." He smiled then, fully for the first time she had seen, warm, unguarded, almost boyish in the dark. "Will you marry me, Barbara Nielsen, on terms you choose?" she answered, with equal clarity. "Yes, on terms we both keep." He cupped her face, giving her room to pull away. She did not. Their kiss was not dramatic. It was deliberate, like a contract signed by two people who had read every line and chosen anyway. When they parted, breathless and laughing under a thin October moon, Barbara rested her forehead briefly against his. "First term," she murmured. "Tomorrow you sleep more than 3 hours." He grimaced. "Cruel." "Second term," she said. "You stop calling my work extraordinary. It is my profession." His eyes softened. "Then you'll need a position worthy of it." "I already have one in mind." On a bright morning in March, Barbara stood in a schoolroom at St. Jude's Charity School, one of Mariston's endowments, and tapped a ledger with the end of her pencil while 12-year-old Elsie Turner tried not to chew her braid. "If 6 loaves are billed daily," Barbara said, "and the baker swears he delivers 4, what do you do first?" "Tell on him." "Eventually. First," Elsie squinted at the page, "check whether the cook counts wrong." Barbara smiled. "Exactly. Facts before fury." At the back table, Mr. Ellery pretended not to listen, and failed. The schoolmaster, Mr. Pritchard, coughed to hide amusement. Barbara had accepted the post formally last month, paid overseer of charitable accounts across 3 schools and 2 almshouses, answerable by contract, not favour. Her salary was modest, her authority was precise, her satisfaction in both was immense. A knock sounded. Adrian appeared in the doorway, hat in hand, mud on his boots from an unplanned stop at the stables. The children straightened as if royalty had arrived, which, in practical terms, it had. "Your Grace," Mr. Pritchard began. "Please ignore me," Adrian said. Failing to be ignorable at 6'2", he looked to Barbara. "When you have a moment." She finished the lesson first, deliberately. Adrian waited without impatience, watching her explain columns and carryovers, as if she were speaking statecraft, which she often thought she was. In the corridor he offered her a folded paper. "From Bow Street, sent to both of us." Barbara read quickly. "Reginald Pike, convicted on charges of conspiracy, witness abduction, document theft and fraud, sentenced to transportation. Lady Nielsen, convicted of fraud and coercive conspiracy, stripped of financial control, confined pending civil settlements, her remaining personal jewels to satisfy creditors and restitution. Jacob Hale and Latham, terms of imprisonment. Mrs. Croft, granted leniency in exchange for full testimony, placed in service with her sister in Kent under protection order." Barbara let out a long breath she had been carrying for months. "It is finished." Adrian nodded. "Legally, yes. Emotionally may take longer." "I can wait," She folded the paper and tucked it into her reticule. "I visited the townhouse yesterday." He looked sharply at her. "Without escort?" "With escort," she said dryly. "Ellery nearly had apoplexy anyway. I stood in the back passage. Cold stone, silver tray, a younger self on her knees swallowing fury." "And?" Adrian asked. "And I did not feel small." She met his gaze. "I felt done." That evening their engagement was announced at a crowded musicale where 3 dowagers nearly swallowed their lorgnettes. Lady Hartwell murmured, "How unexpected," to which Barbara replied pleasantly, "Only if one wasn't paying attention." By supper, the phrase had migrated through Mayfair as both joke and warning. On the morning of her wedding, dawn spilled pale gold over Mariston House. Barbara stood before the mirror in her chamber while Mrs. Gray fastened the final pearl at her collar. Her gown was ivory silk, elegant and severe. On the bed lay her gloves, white and wrist-length. Mrs. Gray, eyes suspiciously bright, said, "Your father would have been proud, miss." Barbara touched the sapphire ring, then lifted one glove and slid it on her right hand. On the left she stopped, looked at the wing-shaped birthmark on her inner wrist, and set the second glove back down. Mrs. Gray followed her gaze and smiled slowly. "Leaving it bare?" "Yes." At the church porch, bells already pealing, Adrian waited in dark morning coat, formidable and unmistakably nervous if one knew where to look, at the hand flexing once at his side, at the breath he forgot to release when he saw her. She came up the steps without hurry, sunlight catching the bare mark at her wrist. Adrian's eyes dropped to it, then rose to her face with the same recognition that had changed both their lives in a muddy stable yard. This time there was no suspicion in it, only wonder and something steadier than wonder. He offered his arm. "Miss Nielsen," she took it, "Your Grace." "Still formal?" "For 3 more minutes." He laughed under his breath as they turned toward the open doors. Inside waited witnesses, vows, a future negotiated in respect rather than fear. Outside, somewhere in memory, cold stone and a dented silver tray belonged to another life. Barbara crossed the threshold standing tall, grave-eyed and unbreakable, and when sunlight struck her bare wrist, she did not hide it,